I'm rather disappointed in you all. I feel like a better title for this episode probably would have been Artist Explains Why AI Isn't the End of the World, but also maybe is the end of the world. I don't know. But at the same time, I didn't expect to have to make this episode. I didn't expect to have this discussion with you. But we're going to, because it's everywhere in my feed and in my social media and everywhere. So I'm weighing in. That's all I really say. So today, Yelling at Concrete, we're going to discuss AI art, and we'll discuss the world's reaction to AI art and how that's impacting artists, and how that's impacting the general public, and how that's impacting non-artists and the people just interact with art, and how that will affect the future of things which come and go as we go along. So if you don't know, in the last 2-3 months, someone perfected a program, multiple programs, I think there was a couple of them, which basically allows people to create images based on whatever they want, right? Based on a few words to suggestions. So you put in, same as kind of Google, but with a more advanced idea, because it creates original images, is that you put in words and you say, hey, man in top hat wearing cane. That whole idea. And then it produces you a illustration, digitally, photograph, whatever you want to call it, which is of a man hat wearing cane, or it'll produce a few of those images, and it can be used to great effect. It can be used to create beautiful images. It can be used to create mind-boggling images and surreal images. And for a while, it couldn't do hands. Hands seemed to be a struggle, which is a gain for me because I know how to draw hands. In fact, it's probably one of the things which I'm actually okay at drawing quite easily without reference. So that was produced, and then it created this wave of comments and contradictions and all these other things, which led to just a furor of nonsense and arguments and people screaming into the void and people screaming back, and this weird his and hers and us versus them of people who are using the technology and people who are in favor of the technology and people who are against the technology. And basically, the usual rigmarole which online media creates. That's all that can really be said. So that's the current situation, and that's what's flooding my feed, right? That's what's flooding my feed. It's flooded with artists who are upset that people are using this technology in the manner that they are, and it's full of people who are using this technology in the manner that they are, who are pissed off with artists because artists are so upset about it. And there's a whole weird line in that where it's like, some people using the format are saying that it's the breakthrough they've needed their entire lives because they feel that having some sort of passion and skill in a medium is gatekeeping, right? And that's something which we might get into further down the line. But first, we should probably discuss some of the arguments which are coming out of the both situation. So one of the main things which they talk about when they talk about AI art, or at least positive people who are fans of it, supporters of it, whatever you want to call it, sycophants of it, are saying that it's the next progression of art. They're saying that it's this thing which is moving things along. And they compare it, one of the main comparisons I've seen is to photography, in the manner that photography was taken from film and then progressed into digital. And digital allows you a lot more tools and enhancement features within a camera, which allows you to create an image in a much more easy manner, right? Which is true. It is technically true. However, it is also the wrong argument to make, right? It's not a valid argument, because even though a camera like this one, like anything you have on your phone, does produce images which are assisted by your camera. For instance, I think my camera has anti-shake technology. It also can put in fake lighting if it wants to. It can do all sorts of things if I have it on automatic mode. But when that was produced and when it was released to the public, the whole idea wasn't that it was to have people create fine art and high concept art. It was just to allow people to get past that initial barrier so they can make regular images within their home. Take pictures of your family, take pictures of your house. And obviously, some people do use that to create things like landscape photography and fine art photography and modeling photography to great effect. There's no arguing against that. But I'm saying it's the wrong argument because AI art isn't particularly along those lines. You're not actually pointing your idea and conceptual lens at an object or a world and taking the photograph with enhancements. What you're doing is you're musing on a concept and producing a found object. And found object art is a completely different thing, right? It's a completely different genre. If you want a good example of found object creators, the most famous of the world most likely is Duchamp, and obviously he produced the urinal, which was mutt, and put it into a gallery, and it caused all kinds of uproar. If you want more modern examples, you got Tomoko Tahashi, Georges Adego. I'm going to butcher his name, and I'm really apologize. Diego, I think. They're all found artists, right? They're all people who used objects within their work to create their work. What I'm saying is, they'll take a stop sign from the street. That'll be part of that's part of the artwork. That's something which is included in the artwork, adds to the concept. Duchamp obviously took the toilet and put it into a gallery. And when he did that, the whole idea with it was to challenge the discussion, right? It was to challenge what could be art, what we could consider to be art, because modern art, for the most part, is concept based. It's not about the technique you use. It's not about how many brushstrokes you've put into something or anything like that. It's all about what you apply to the situation. And I think the photography argument falls down pretty much the same way the animation argument falls down. Because the animation argument, again, people are like, oh, well, we went from these hand-drawn things which you need to produce and you need skill and talent to draw and blah, 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 and now we do it digitally. We can progressively animate things. We can put physics engines into things and we can push it through. And at the same time, all of that's true. We have. Technology has advanced in a massive manner, right? It's advanced to such a scale that these things are easier. It's easier to produce these things. But at the same time, it still requires people, it still requires involvement, and it still requires someone stepping in to say, hey, let's program, let's do, let's fix, let's shape, all these kinds of things. So AI artists, again, have come back against this and said, oh, well, that's the difference. We use the AI art to produce a basic, and then we modify it using tools like Photoshop, and we use tools to draw into it to change the AI art. We get a sketch from the AI engine, and that brings us out. That's the whole gist, right? So why are artists pissed off, right? Why are artists so angry about AI? If it is just this push of technology, if it is just this leap forward in what is capable, they should feel happy, right? You should feel happy that you can produce this in a fraction of the time it would take you to do it before. The reason that artists aren't happy with AI art isn't the technology at all. They don't care about the technology because artists choose the technology that they work with. Photographers choose the camera they work with. They choose whether to do it digitally. They choose to how they have enhancements. Animators choose to hand draw, choose to stop mode. I'm using stop mode like it's a verb, but stop motion. They choose the medium they work within, and then they make that work for the concept which they are progressing, right? And AI art is no different. AI art would be no different. Hell, AI is used within art. It exists already. AI art exists because you have things which help you produce other things. It's an engine. It's something which is just processing your image, and sometimes it varies, which means it is somewhat self-aware and somewhat able to look at your work and make decisions for you, which then help push out whatever you're going to push out. We've all used filters at one point or another to produce something. That's just a factor. Hell, you could say a photocopier is AI art because you run it through and it comes out different to what you had in it. That's what I'm saying. So they're not pissed about the tool. What artists are actually annoyed about, and what AI supporters seem to misunderstand, is that these machines and these software which were built in order to produce these images did so by scraping every other image on the internet in order to produce content which is very, very similar or imitatable as the original. And they did it without permission, which basically lowers down to IP theft, which is a very serious thing within the art world. The fact that there's been no remorse for it, the fact that companies are saying this is a good thing, and the fact that there is no opt-out clause, well, there is an opt-out clause, which I'll get to in a minute, the fact that you essentially don't have a choice in this is what artists are pissed about. There's no grand rail against the technology. We don't care about the technology. What we care about is the fact that work has been stolen to produce it, right? One thing. So essentially what it's been doing is going along, looking at other people's work and locking it in as that type of work. There was the famous example, which I can think of on Twitter, was that an artist died and someone instantly took their entire catalogue of work, uploaded it into an AI engine as produce this type of person's work, which the AI engine now does. They did it without permission, they did it without consulting the family of the artist, which meant that style, which has spent time, money, resources, their lifetime to produce, had suddenly been ripped off. It's suddenly been produced into something else, which isn't theirs, but isn't anybody's, because it's just an imitation of the thing before. Essentially, it's fake Gucci handbags, right? That's what AI is. It's imitation product. It is something which is almost as good, but not as good, because it lacks the basic concept. And now to answer that question, because we're going to go on this ramble in an order which I don't think is probably logical, but we're going to do it anyway, because this is how I roll. Some of the artists out there creating AI have also said, oh, well, yeah, but if art's about the concept, then it shouldn't matter that it looks like your thing. Well, that's true, but also that means that the work which you're creating, which you call such and such style, or in this artist style, isn't that artist style, because what you've done is you've removed all level of concept from the work. There's a big idea within art and discussion of it, of when something is made by an artist who is self-taught versus someone who is taught by an institution, and that becomes very important when you look at the work, because when you look at the work, it shows the level of commitment and context and struggle which the artist put in to make something, especially when it comes to something like sculpture. Sculpture is probably the example which is biggest in this. If you see an artist which is self-taught and there's a bronze sculpture, it means that that artist put in the time, effort, resources outside of their regular life, whatever they were doing before, and made this. They still produce this level of skill and technique to produce a bronze sculpture. Someone who hasn't, and someone who's been in an institution, has obviously had some privileges and obviously makes work which comes from a different place. It comes from a different background. It comes from a different upbringing. It's very important where the art came from. So AI producing work which looks like someone else's work is completely void of concept, right? The concept was, I want to make something which looks like that. That's fine. That's fine if that's what you're looking to create, but there's no concept in it. If you took it to a fine art gallery and said that I made this, and yes, oh great, it looks like such and such's drawings, that's fine, but they're going to see it for exactly what it is, which is just an imitation. It's just something which is similar, which is kind of pathetic, in my personal opinion. And I think that falls into the category of, the larger discussion of what this means. So, some people have been saying that AI art's going to kill art, right? It's going to kill traditional art. It's going to make us redundant. It's going to make us unemployed. I mean, I don't know who needs to break this to you, but art has never been a profitable field. It just hasn't. What it does mean is the limitation on resources, doesn't it? And I'll use photography probably better as this example, right? It is a movement. It is a change. It is a alteration in how work can be produced into the world, and there's no denying that. This is probably the first time in many, many years that digital art has had a challenger like this. Every other medium in one way or another has faced a challenger, photography being the prime example. You had film photographers. Film photography required you to not only understand light and shape and all the things which go into to forming a picture, but it required you to understand the mechanics of the film camera, film processing, chemicals, timing, how to enlarge an image, all these kinds of things. Digital photography took all of that away and said, hey, you can do all of that in this small box. In fact, this small box will probably do most of it for you, and then all you have to do is print it, and printing is as easy as a click of a button. And animation did exactly the same thing. Hand-drawn animators struggled. They struggled through a period of time where that just wasn't done. And it alters the value of the work that you're creating. But it never really kills it, right? I mean, even sculpting's had this. 3D printing came along. 3D printing can produce anything. It can produce work which is as detailed as Rembrandt's in a click of a button. It can be 3D modeled and produced, and you chiseling away for years at marble, that's pointless. Absolutely pointless. Why would you do that when you do? But people still do, don't they? Right? Hand-drawn animation still happens. We had Aaron Long on the show. He regularly produces sketches of animation. We've had multiple comic creators, zine makers on the show who still produce in a medium which is basically outdated in a modern age, right? I shoot film photography. I own digital cameras, but I shoot film photography. What I'm saying is, AI art is not even close to killing art. All it does is adjust the balance, and it puts a new value on the things that you do, right? It puts a new value on that commitment. Yes, it's probably not going to be your answer. Digital artistry and digital painting and all these kinds of things are probably not going to be your answer to the big money anymore. It's not, because companies, especially large companies with no scruples, are going to use something like an AI engine to produce the work that they want to produce. That's just the truth. That's the reality of capitalism. But in doing so, what you can do suddenly becomes much more valuable to the people who do appreciate it. It makes it higher concept. It makes it another step in adding to that conversation and adding to the value of the work which you're creating. People still pay for film photography. They still pay for people to sculpt. They still pay for stop motion films, and people still put the time and effort into that art. And this is probably just the first time that that's been challenged. Now, don't get me wrong, right? That sounded very altruistic. Sounded like I was very on sides of both sides. I'm not. Because as I stated earlier, AI art suffers from one thing which Jeff Goldblum talked to us about for a very long time. People were so concerned whether they could that they didn't stop to think whether they should. And it's going to cause all kinds of things. It's going to cause all kinds of copyright law battles, and it's going to cause all kinds of situations which are probably not going to be pleasant for artists and the people using AI art. I can very much foresee intellectual property lawyers just rubbing their hands with glee at what is coming. And if you're using AI art, I don't want you to sit there and think, oh, well, I'm in a completely protected zone. I'm off this scot-free, because you're not. But what I want you to consider is what you're actually creating, right? When you think about it at its core, and when I think about it at its core, outside of the stolen work, right? Outside of the reference and the tracing and taking inspiration from, which AI art, all are arguments which people have claimed, right? That's the same as all those things. Outside of that, it does nothing to further the conversation of what is and isn't art. Right? It doesn't. And that's the problem with it. That's the main problem I have with AI, outside of the theft conversation, is that as a technology, it stunts the progress of the medium of fine art. Because it's very generic. It very much just says, well, if it's an image, it's art. And if I put thoughts into it, it's art. If I put keywords into it, it's art, right? No. I have sour news for you, but it's not. Art's in the eye of the beholder. It's in the eye of the creator. And once it's pushed out into the world, it's in the eye of the public. And in the eye of the public, art, as a medium, is about concept. So if you're removing the majority of the concept, and you're looking to produce work in such a quick way that you can create a passive income, then you're not really creating art, are you? You're creating content. You're creating something vapid, something thin, something threadbare, something which anyone can push a hole through. And you're looking at it thinking, oh, well, but because I can see it, because it's there on the screen, it has all that depth. And I'm sad to say that no, it doesn't. There are millions of people in this world who can think of ideas and think of concepts, but not realize those concepts into the real world. AI has given them that tool. It has given them the idea that anything they can think of can now be produced as an image. But if your participation in creation of that image is minimal, then it's redundant in terms of fine art and modern art, and it doesn't progress the conversation of what art is. When Duchamp took the found object of the toilet and put it into a gallery, he was questioning traditional art. He was questioning everything which had gone before it and said, this could be art because I've said it's art. Because not only am I putting it into the gallery, I'm putting it into the gallery on its back. I'm not hanging it from a wall in the position it should be. I'm not taking it and peeing into it. No, I'm putting it there as a study, as something for you to look at and say, that's interesting. Where if all you're doing is taking something, reproducing something, and just saying, oh, this is such X, Y, and Z, that requires no study. It's vapid. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's the Ron seal of art. The other comparison I think to is just that, it's not unique anymore. You're not producing something that's unique. It's the equivalent of music, right? And this is probably my last metaphor for this whole ramble. It's the equivalent of creating music. Years and years ago, music was this very high-end thing because owning instruments was an extremely expensive job, right? It was classical. It was the people for high society. And the people within lower society took that as an affront. And they made their own instruments. They made their own ways of making music. They made their own styles of music. They took the inspiration from the things around them and poured them into things to create their own, right? And all of those things they created were unique because they were blends of people's personalities and people's progression. Over time, that got bought. It got bought and it got sold, which meant every time that happened, the music industry changed and genres changed and people moved around what was being created. So eventually you got large corporations who wanted to produce music and produce what they saw as art in a quick, efficient manner so they could sell more and more. AI art isn't Dolly Parton. It's not the Rolling Stones. It's not The Clash. It's not even someone like Adele. It's not work which comes from the passion and soul of the creator. AI art is mass manufactured corporate schlock. If that's what you're looking to make, so be it. I can't stop you. No one will be able to stop you. Because if what you want to make is something which is popular and profitable, which minorly imitates the great progressive things which came before it, then so be it. But you can't get mad when people look at it and instantly see through it. Because that's what you've chosen to create. I don't think AI art's going anywhere, but I don't think it's going to kill the art industry. I think people recognize what's there and what's not. The problem with AI art isn't that it's AI art. The problem with AI art is the scruples behind the people who've made the technology. And if you're an artist and you're depressed about the whole situation, just remember that. Right? Remember that these industries and situations go through changes. Yes, it's disheartening and there's a lot of change coming, but those stealing will get their comeuppance. And on the other side of it, if you're an AI art, consider what you create. Consider the concept behind what you're creating, because art at its core is concept, not keywords. And hopefully that helps explain the situation a bit more to everybody. And if not, maybe I made it worse. But either way, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.